Welcome to the hood. Hello. How is everyone doing? I'm Jack Bigadu, and if you don't know what my name is on the street, Hood Sommelier, here to talk to you about whiskey. I knew about this brand, but not really. But really, where they picked my, kind of grabbed my attention is when one of the magazine that I respect named them the whiskey of the year. And I'm like, who are these people? I need to know more about them. So one of the things I did that I say, hey, who is the brand ambassador that I've been talking about this so much, and people tried it so much that it made the list of whiskey of the year in 2023 on Whisky Advocate list. So I brought in the brand ambassador. His name is Rory. But before Rory come in, I want to give you a little insight into the brand. So I'm going to play you a clip that says a little bit of what the brand it's about. So just a moment, just jump in and you will see.
There's a place where the land meets the sea, where the senses are awakened, and sweet air mingles with the crack of sea salt, where luscious waves of tropical fruit are carried on an ocean breeze until they come home to rest in this place of perfect harmony. With rolling waves of flavor shaped by land and sea, Glenglassaugh awakened the senses.
You heard it. It's Glenglassaugh, and here I have Rory Glasgow, the brand ambassador of Glenglassaugh. Rory, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here. Thank you, Jack. Yeah, I know it's funny, isn't it? Glasgow,
Yeah,
Glasgow.
I thought there was a mistake. I'm like, wait a minute, is that the right name?
Yeah, so it's funny actually. Glass, Glass, in Scots Gaelic means grey green. It's kind of like Gaelic's a
Okay,
funny language in that it can have a whole word that essentially describes what we would usually say in English is like a phrase or
right.
kind of several sentences. So it is very fitting. So yeah, grey green, and as you saw from that video there, Glenglassaugh, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful area of Scotland.
I can't wait to actually visit. I can only imagine what that looks like from just the sea and what we have on just what I saw from
Mhm.
the picturesque part of it. I love the sea. I'm originally from West Africa, and being just on the coastal side of things makes it so much more fun
Oh
to
yeah.
be. And so I'm quite excited to hear about this brand, to know what's happening, and hopefully to hear how this came about, and know more about you and the brand. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Rory to the show. Rory, for the people that don't know you, who are you? I want to know more about you first.
Yeah. So I have been, from an industry perspective, I've been working in the world of single malt now since really officially since I came to the US in 2017. And but my passion for single malt goes far beyond that. So I'm from Edinburgh originally, which to go back to my namesake is kind of a wee bit confusing.
Hmm.
Coming from Edinburgh, but last name Glasgow. So I've been representing these three distilleries, Glenglassaugh being the one we're covered today, but also Glendronach and Binriach. So three single malt distilleries, all since Brown Forman, who's our parent company, who owns Jack Daniels, Woodford Reserve, Old Forester. I'm sure you're familiar with them.
Yes.
They acquired these three distilleries in 2016. So they really, from these distilleries, what they really needed was that extra push, and Brown Forman was able to come in and hire folks like myself to really drive that educational advocacy forward. So we really hit the ground running in 2017. But before I came to the US, obviously being in Edinburgh, I really discovered single malt from working part time in a pub in Edinburgh. So I worked part time when I was in university doing my undergraduate as a 19-year-old, didn't know anything about single malt at all.
Hmm.
Terrified of the concept. Every time I turned around, the pub I worked at is a beautiful old school traditional pub in Edinburgh, and in a lovely area of Edinburgh called Morningside. And there was about maybe 300 single malts kind of lining the walls behind
Wow.
the bar, and it was off limits to like people like me, 19-year-old bartender, didn't know anything, and so it kind of scared me. I didn't know anything, but slowly but surely, I started kind of curiosity got the better of me, picking bottles up, reading them, opening them up if they're already open, smelling them, and seeing what the differences were. And I was very lucky that actually the some of the regulars at the pub were very influential and still are in the industry of single malt. And so I was lucky that some of them actually kind of, I think, could see where that path was going for me, and they kind of took me under their wing. So the inventor of the Glencairn, funnily enough, was a regular drinker, and so he kind of got me into the industry and really opened
Wow.
my eyes to that. So yeah, and I still talk to him regularly. Raymond Davidson's a lovely man, and so he kind of got me kind of into the more of a business aspect of it. So I went back to university. I did my master's in marketing, and it was all tailored towards single malt, and then moved over to the US, and then I'm representing 3 distilleries, and it's a great time to be with these 3 distilleries, because obviously Glenglassaugh is the one, like you were alluding to in the beginning. You've maybe heard of it, some people have, some people haven't, but it's really, if you know anything about Glenglassaugh, and for people like myself that have worked close to the brand for a long time, we've been waiting for this moment for so long, because it really has been a bit of a sleeper distillery, but now
Yeah.
it's awake, it's there, and it's got people asking questions about it. So it just needed that little push, and we're here. But we'll talk more about history and how it got to be in a wee bit, I'm sure. But that's me,
Absolutely.
Rory.
I,
And I,
you know
I just
what? I love your background. I love that you started in the industry. You started from the bottom, went to school, learned, and that's pretty much I explain to people. Sometime, people don't understand people's story and how they got into whiskey. Once you know their story, what they say makes much more sense, and how they approach the way they tell the story of a whiskey makes much more sense. So, welcome to the
yep.
show, right?
Thank
Welcome
you.
to the show. So you represent two so far of my favorite single malt. So the third one today, I would decide if this one will be my third one. Obviously, I'm a big, huge fan of Glendronach. You cannot tell me Glendronach doesn't make the best whiskey out there. I'm a huge fan of Banriac. Banriac is my second favorite, but Glendronach is on top. All of them have one thing in common that I'm a huge fan of. So that's actually the reason why um, I actually obviously got curious about those brands. But tell us about Glenglassaugh. How did
Yeah.
that come about?
So it's history plays a, and this is what really got me into single malt, was just the production side. Obviously, is fascinating, but the historical side of a distillery really tells that story of kind of the background, how it got to be where it is. And every distillery has a phenomenal story when you look back in the history books. But Glenglassaugh, particularly, as a distillery that in many ways have kind of has come onto the scene, last year when we got this award, but obviously it goes far, far beyond that rebranding and relaunch that we did in the summer of last year. So it was established in 1875, which in Scotch whiskey, you couldn't have timed it better to open up a distillery. So when you look at the kind of historical timing,
Mhm,
single malt was doing very well, and especially into the 1880s and into the 1890s. It was certainly like the golden era of single malt. And so
mhm,
lots of distilleries were coming online, or if they've been making whiskey for a long time, like Glendronach, 1826, even older, were really kind of coming into their own. And so 1875 poised for success. And Glenglassaugh was very successful. And we got some great books. There's a wonderful book that essentially goes back. A chap was touring distilleries in the 1880s and writing about everything he found at each distillery that he visited. And for a distillery that no one's heard of now, until maybe now, again, this award came out, Glenglassaugh got phenomenal reviews, especially by this chap that was very renowned in the industry. And it was making fine single malt, particularly Highland single malt, but we'll talk about its coastal location as well and how that influences the whiskey. But sadly, there was at the turn of the century, 1900, going into about 1899, 1900, really started to take effect, was basically an industry collapse for multiple reasons, but we call it the Patterson's crash, which puts a lot of blame on this big blending firm that essentially was taken to court, bankrupt, and the whole industry basically fell apart. And so Glenglassaugh, sadly, got caught up in that. Benriach, funnily enough, as well, got caught up in that. And Glenglassaugh was closed in about 1907. and it wouldn't reopen until 1950 when it was refurbished. And so when it came back online, it had a bit of work to do. And so it started producing whiskey. But funnily enough, the industry had changed dramatically by that point. People weren't really drinking single malt. Single malt was really being funneled into blended Scotch whiskies. And so in the 1960s, 1970s, what blenders were looking for were whiskies that were more, and what I guess what you really want as a single malt distillery is a whiskey that's easy to blend with other whiskeys. So it plays nice with other single malts and grain
Mhm.
whiskeys. And it has flavors that are not going to stick out in kind of odd directions. So apples, pears, vanilla, honey, your classic Speyside whiskies did very well. Benriach did very well because that's, again, classic Speyside, although they do lots of different styles. Glenglassaugh, though, is not your kind of classic malt in many ways. It has flavors, and as we'll get into some of the whiskeys here,
Mhm.
it has flavors of pineapple, mango, papaya, straight off the stills. Very oily, very rich, very tropical. And that is not flavors that you can use in large scale volume in blended Scotch whiskies. So
Correct.
Glenglassaugh, that was a period of struggle. And we did close in 1986. And so from 1986 to 2008, Glenglassaugh sat closed for a long time. And so it wasn't until 2008, 2009, we really started production up again. And we've now just only really started to get an age statement from Glenglassaugh. So that 12 year that you saw in that picture there, you just flashed up, that might not sound like much to many distilleries, but that for us has been a
It's a big
long
deal.
time in the works. Yeah, it's
Mm.
huge for us. Obviously, we have a lot of older stock that goes back to the 80s and the 70s and the 60s, but we've got nothing in between because we weren't producing. So this 12 year is a product of that 2008 kind of
Kind of
revival that we went through.
revival of the brand. So
Exactly.
before we start getting to the whiskey himself, you said something that I wanted to bring back up. It's so what happened there is, um, and a few people are on Instagram as well saying hello. So hello everyone that is
Hello,
coming on
hello.
Instagram. Thank you if you're here. Share this with your friend if you're on Facebook. Share this. Give us a love, a thumbs up. The real question I will put out there as we are going through is, and I'm gonna display the question is, who here have had Glenglassaugh? I want to know how many people actually have had it because I feel like it came out of nowhere, right? It just showed up out of nowhere, and it became just whiskey of the year. And I was like, okay, wait a minute, what did I miss here, right? So I'm gonna display the question. Who how do you speak this English again? Who have had
There you go.
Glenn? Glenn. I will make sure Glenn Glassell.
I was going to
We'll
say good luck
display.
because it took me a few times trying to spit. When I first got the job, even I had never really heard of it when I first started working for them, although we had it in the pub, funnily enough, that I
Yeah,
worked at. That's a tricky one to spell, even for
yeah.
someone that is from Scotland.
Who
Yeah.
have had Glenglassaugh? So that'll be the question as we are tasting through this. I want to hear your answer. And I want the comment. I want to know who have had it. What do you guys think as we are getting into the whiskey? I'll be displaying response as we are actually going through. So if you're on Facebook, you're on Twitter, you're on YouTube, anywhere you are, I'll be sure to display your answer here as we are going. So you said we have older stocks as we came through the
Mhm.
revival. What's the
Yes,
oldest stock you have? Because I think I heard or saw somewhere that there's a 51-year-old whiskey.
yeah. So we actually, funnily enough, just this month, actually just a few days ago, on the 22nd of January, we knew about it, but we released it kind of officially that we were releasing what's called our Serpentine collection, which is Serpentine is, just to give you a wee context as to what that means and why we're calling it that. Serpentine is, funnily enough, it's a marble. It looks like marble in every respect. It looks like marble, but it's actually not technically a marble. And this marble is formed around the Glenglassaugh distillery in the little town next door to us called Portsoy. And Serpentine marble was used in across the world as some of the kind of finest marble, and it's black with streaks of green going through it. It's beautiful. And if you go to the Palace of Versailles in France, actually many of the fireplaces are decked out with much of this Serpentine marble. So we're kind of paying an homage to that that old industry that would have been very popular back in the day at Portsoy and around Glenglassaugh distillery. But so the Serpentine collection is essentially those older casks that date back to the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. And so,
Mhm.
yes, to your point, we just released a 48, a 49, and a 51. And so again, it's a weird space to be in as a distillery. So,
Right.
most distilleries have their 12, their 15, their 18, their 21 and beyond. And then,
Mhm.
they've got their ultra luxury kind of older expressions. But for us, we're working with that core three. You can see
Mhm.
them kind of behind me here. And
Yeah.
then with big gap, and then you're getting into the 40s and the 50s instantly. So, um, I believe some of the casks that we're using there, and if you go into Glenglassaugh's coastal warehouses, and again, we're about a 4-minute walk to the beach there. So
Mhm.
we're very much a coastal highland, so that North Sea air is coming into the warehouse and getting sucked up into the wood, and then it's really imparting that unusual coastal, not quite a little hint of salinity, not quite. It's not iodine, not like the Isla whiskey distilleries, but certainly that little touch of salinity just getting in there, and it takes that tropical fruit note coupled with that little bit of salinity, and it's just a whiskey that, and I say this a lot, but it's unlike any whiskey that I've had. It's so unique. And again, you saw how why maybe it didn't favor Glenglassaugh back in the
Mhm.
1970s and 80s for
Mhm.
blending purposes, but for single malt, it is fantastic. So those older whiskeys are just, they're special. And again, they sat there through the entire time that we were closed. And the whiskey did release some of those single casks to private bottlers just to
Mhm.
basically basic maintenance, probably a bit of security, just to
Correct.
give them some money, probably just to keep the kettle on for the tea for the
Correct.
security guards. But yeah, it's they've sat there for a long time, and now we're starting to release some of them. But just it's funny as your followers are answering or thinking about this question of who's
Mhm.
had Glenglassaugh. We have had whiskey. So I'll tell you a story about me back in Edinburgh when I was working in that pub. So we did actually have a bottle of Glenglassaugh. It was called Revival, and it was a different bottle than what you see, than what we've released now. This is rebranded. This is a new
Mhm.
bottle, new expressions. But we did have an old core um, with 3 expressions. There was the Revival, there was the Torfa, and there was the Evolution. 3
I'm
unique
I'm
whiskies
looking
from
I'm looking
Glenglassaugh.
them up right now. Okay, yeah, I'm seeing them
Yeah.
right now.
So again, we never people that love single malt, even those whiskeys, very small percentage of people had even really heard of it, and even fewer people had even had Glenglassaugh
Yeah.
from that time. And they were beautiful whiskeys. And I remember working in the pub, and I remember we'd got this bottle in, and it was on the back shelf, and it just sat there, and no one asked about it, no one opened it, it just sat there. And there was a chap that came into the pub, and he lived just like a few doors down, and I'd seen him a couple of times come in, and he was like, "Oh, you've got Glenglassaugh," and I was like, "Yeah, no one's opened it. Yeah, do you want to open it?" He's like, "Yeah," and so he wanted a drink of it, and it happened that he was a part of the team that actually acquired the distillery, not part of Brown Forman, but he was a part of the team that acquired it under our previous owner in 2013. So that was back into 2013. This guy
Wow.
who was a part of that team that acquired it from the owners that initially set up in 2008. And so he knew that this pub that I worked at had a bottle, and he cracked it open. And he told me the story of Glenglassaugh. And I was like, okay, wow. Very serendipitous to then have this
Yeah.
paths cross and then work for them later on. But he told me the story about how it was closed and how it reopened. And this is a whiskey that at that time period was probably about 4.5, 5 years old. It was young.
Wow.
But even at
There you
that
go.
age statement, still fantastic. There it is there.
There you
Um,
go.
and actually, this is nice because they called it Revival because obviously that distillery got revived. You can see the lovely
Correct.
coastline there
Correct.
on the top of the box and on the label. But yeah, we needed a bit of a refresh, I think, moving forward. So what we're going with now is certainly where we want to be. And every time we bottled these older whiskies, the Revival, the Evolution, the Torfa, they were progressively getting older every time we vatted them. And so now we're at a stage where we've now gotten to a point where the whiskey is just right, that we're now bottling it as we want to. So
All
yeah,
right.
beautiful
We,
stuff.
we've talked people ears off. I think people want to know probably what does the whiskey taste like, right? So
Absolutely.
if you had to introduce someone to Glenglassaugh as a brand, where would you get them started? Where would you say, well, let's start somewhere?
I would say Sand End. You cannot
Okay.
beat this whiskey. It is the best place to start because it really lays the foundation for, I think, place, where we
Okay.
are geographically speaking, and also it will lay the foundation for what the distillery character is, the profile, the DNA of Glenglassaugh.
All right. Okay. I will. Well, I will start with that. And what does Sundan mean?
Sand End is the name of the beach that we sit upon. So we are on a little embankment that, like I said, is about a 3-4 minute walk to the beach, if that. And Sand End is just the name of the beach that we sit on. And it's a beautiful beach up in the northeast of Scotland. So if you're looking at that map behind me, kind of right on that
Yeah.
easterly cusp, right here where my finger is on that coastline, kind of straddling that East Highland and Speyside border, that is where Glenglassaugh is. And so that lovely coastline that runs atop of the north of Scotland there is where we are. And this beach is popular with dog walkers, surfers, dolphins. You'll find often in that little bay there. Beautiful part of Scotland. And you saw it in a little bit of that intro video there showcasing the beach. And so what I want you to do, Jack, is imagine you're down by Sandend Beach. You've got the distillery behind you. You've got the North Sea air
Mhm.
coming in. And often when we're tasting whiskeys, I think we always dip our nose in and we smell it and we taste it and go, oh, okay. But really sit and pause with this one. I think this is the one key thing that I have to catch myself often, that I'm just kind of not rushing things, but we do this a lot, don't we? But nice to take some time just to nose this. And one of the things that really instantly pops out the glass for me, and this was the one that got Whiskey of the Year. I'm not sure if you said saw the article. So this is Sand
Yeah.
End. So it's aged in a combination of bourbon, sherry casks,
Mhm.
and also manzanilla sherry casks,
Okay.
manzanilla, which is an unusual cask to see. And what this gives the whiskey on the nose is that kind of, even on the nose, you can tell it's almost oily and buttery and thick. It's got that lovely richness about it. It's got this.
It may be the
br-
glass I'm using, but I tell you the first thing, and this is the really distinctive of this whiskey. The first thing I got is citrus zest and peel, like a citrus
Yeah,
peel, citrus zest, very like nice light citrus come through immediately. It's like it's like somebody had a key lime pie that just went by me, right? And
100%.
I'm like, what is this? Like the first thing like, when you were talking, my brain was like, what is this citrus note that is just popping up? It's very bright, very poppy
Pop
immediately.
it,
Yeah,
100%. And
yeah.
even our master blender, Dr. Rachel Barry, she when she was writing the tasting notes for this, she used the word effervescent, and I was
Hmm.
like, yeah, it's like a fizzy, effervescent, almost like a grapefruit or a lime note really coming through. It's got that bright poppiness, 100%, 100%. So
Now the oiliness I can definitely see even on the whiskey. Um, like the way the legs are coming down on the whiskey, I can definitely see a little bit of that. But when you are going through, there is a certain depth, and I think, and people may not know this, but I'm a I'm Dr. Rachel Berry fan, 100%. Like
yeah,
she will never do wrong by me ever when it comes to her touching a whiskey. So every
yep,
whiskey she had from Glendronach, from Benriach to this one, I almost feel like she have that Midas touch, right?
yep.
So when I heard that she was behind this project, I say absolutely yes. It makes sense. I didn't even have the
Yeah.
whiskey. I'm like absolutely yes, yes. I say yes
she
immediately, right?
She's amazing. I mean, it's funny to look back at even her career with Brown Forman and from 2016, 2017 onwards. I mean, what an opportunity to have to relaunch Ben Riach back in 2020, and her fingerprints are now all over those whiskeys. Those are many
Hmm.
ways. Obviously, the product of all the labor and the love went in to those whiskeys previous to her time, but um, as a master blender to bring all those flavors to make them greater than the sum of their parts, incredible. And then to do it again with Glenglassaugh, it's amazing. So she's really getting to kind of flex her muscles
Yes,
at
yes,
what is
indeed.
in many ways,
Yes,
yeah,
indeed.
the peak of her career at this time is just, it's amazing to see what she's capable of, and given that platform twice now. Um, and she's doing it with Glendronach as well in many
Yeah,
ways, but just fantastic. So go ahead and give it a wee sip. Let's see what we
yeah.
get. Yeah.
Let's see what this is about.
I'm gonna see what you say because I don't want to fill your mind with my
Wow.
thoughts before we. Yeah.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. So this is a 50.5% ABV.
Doesn't drink it.
Doesn't drink like it.
Surprising.
That's one. Oh my God. So this is pineapple, citrus, marmalade, right? This is pineapple citrus marmalade with a drizzle of cinnamon. Not even cinnamon. It's something like a little spice thing, but it's not like spice like it's almost like white pepper ish. Not
Hmm.
really cinnamony, but white pepper ish with some dry fruit, dry like obviously some almond on the front, but some dry fruit in the mid and the back of the palate. But those like bright fruit, stone fruit, pineapple, citrus are so bright. They're
Yeah.
just held by that fig ish and finished down with those green grape, not red grape, green grapes. A little
100%.
like if I had to list pineapple, citrus, apple, green grapes, and then a little bit of fig in the back, that's how I would describe the fruity note of this whiskey.
Yep, you've nailed it. I love that you said pineapple. I totally get all those kind of green grape. It's got an apricot peach note. And it's almost, you said fig, and I think that's a great descriptor, but it's almost held together as well by this lovely viscosity. And again, the color on this is light. This I
Mhm,
would not call this dark whiskey. This is certainly a
mhm,
lovely kind of gold
mhm,
color on the lighter side, and it's 101 proof. It's
mhm.
50.5%. And knowing what we know about Glenglassaugh, it's not old whiskey. There might be some 12-year touching that kind of
Mhm.
12-year mark in here, but as we know from the previous core line that we had before we have this stuff now, that stuff was young, and that stuff was coming in at like 4.5, 5, 6 years old, and it still
Yeah,
tasted. You could tell it was, it needed a little bit of rounding out,
yeah.
and that's what we saw year in, year out, but still drank phenomenally. So I can bet you that Rachel's drawing upon a real spectrum of different ages and just to really reflect, I think, the versatility of that whiskey. But that pineapple note is bang on, and that is the flavors that straight off the still we're seeing this kind of tropical citrus note, and it's almost kind of grapefruit going into pineapple, mango, papaya, and it still has that classic kind of green apple note as well. But you said grape, which I thought was a phenomenal descriptor. That is bang on, especially for this whiskey. And that is what I think, coupled with its coastal proximity, is what makes Glenglassaugh just wonderfully complex and unlike many whiskies that we see. And that's what Whisky Advocate picked up on, was the history. It's a phenomenal comeback story, and the uniqueness of the distillery's DNA that runs through all of these whiskies. And it really is being allowed to shine in the sand end. It's fantastic.
The finish, I don't think gets enough credit.
Mm-mm.
This finish is long and lingering. It doesn't just stop. It's long and quite lingering. It stays with you. That viscosity kind of stays on the top of your palate there and just roam around and just stays around, right? And a lot of whiskeys don't have that, but I feel like that's almost what will make you go back to this whiskey is that the finish, it's
Yeah.
it stays with you, make it
It's funny.
memorable.
Yeah, 100%. What I really love about the finish, and you're right, it does not get enough credit because I think there's so much focus and emphasis on the the instantaneous hit of that fruit, particularly tropical fruit, which is so unusual. But that finish is, but it turns into like a soft, buttery caramel, honeycomb, and you're almost seeing the emergence of that bourbon cask starting to come out at the
Hmm.
tail end. Where
Hmm.
if I was to taste a whiskey that was again young, high proof, young in respect to what we've got going on here compared to some of the older stuff, but I would say it would hit you with all that lovely citrus and fruit, and it would die away to the background and it wouldn't really have a lingering finish. But that achieves both that balance of bright poppy citrus and then that lovely finish of caramel, honeycomb, buttery, vanilla. It's incredible.
Absolutely. We're a little
Yeah.
frozen right now, but don't worry about it. It'll reset. This thing play games sometime.
You're good. I can hear you and you're frozen as well. So we're both frozen.
It takes a moment and then it resets again. So hopefully we are back on soon. So if there is a second option,
Mhm.
that we go from this kind of bright 50%, ABV, what do we move on to from there?
I would say the 12 is going to be the one that you really want to go to next. And I think given that you like Glendronach, this certainly might be up your alley in terms of that style of more sherry forward. This is
Mhm,
really going to be, I would say, more of your classic malt, where
mhm,
Sandend is a bit more, I think, innovative in its use of manzanilla casks, which drive up that kind of salinity because
mhm,
it's a coastal sherry and really gives you that bite that helps to almost work in tandem with the tropical citrus that we have.
mhm,
The 12 is going to be more of a classic, deeper, richer, sherry forward coastal Highland malt. It's a combination of three casks. We're using bourbon,
mhm.
sherry, and a little bit of red wine, just a touch of red wine cask. I wouldn't say this is, some red. I think red wine can be a controversial cask in some whiskeys.
Correct.
I've found that it can really work, and when it works, wonderfully well. And when it doesn't, you do get not off notes, but it just doesn't integrate well with what's going on with the rest of the palate and the nose. But this works wonderful, and actually, it's funny. This is very much an evolved version of that Glenglassaugh revival that you showed a wee picture of there earlier.
Yeah.
Same cask profile, but obviously we've now got an age statement, 12 years old, and there's obviously going to be a real tweaking of casks. This is not the same whiskey, but you can see where it's come from, but very
Mhm,
much a Rachel Barry creation in this sense. And it's funny, I've tried so often to pick a favorite out of these three, and we'll obviously get to Port Soy at the end. But
mhm,
I, as much as I fell in love with Sandend, because I was like, yep, that's Glenglassaugh, that's that tropical fruit, that's that pineapple, love that, love to see it.
mhm,
It's so undeniably uniquely Glenglassaugh. But the 12, that might be my new kind of go-to unwinding, relaxing little sipper. It is so seductively sherry, and I'm a big sucker for sherry
mhm.
casks, and I'm lucky that I work with Glendronach so well. But it's this is really scratching that kind of sherry itch. I just love it. And again, with that, what the red wine cask brings is the lovely tannins that you get from red wine casks, which to us on the
Mhm,
palate and the nose bring some tannins in, which gives us a little bit of bitterness, which then
mhm.
accelerates that almost salinity coastal note on the palate, while also having more of these deeper, richer, candied pistachio notes coming through. We've got figs and dates, those classic dried fruit notes, coupled with
A
some
lot of a
chocolate.
lot of dry fruit coming through. A lot of dry
Yeah,
fruit.
it's just it's one. I was talking to Rachel about this when she launched Glenglassaugh. I was talking with Rachel and our global ambassador Stuart Buchanan, and we were doing just a lovely little round table talking about these whiskies as they got launched. And I was blown away by the fact that this tastes older. It has an aroma and flavor profile that punches well above its 12-year-old age statement.
Mhm,
And again, I almost feel like when Glenglassaugh has an age statement, if it's 5 years old, it almost presents as like a 7 or 8-year-old. And when it's a
mhm.
12-year-old, it's almost presenting as a 14, 15-year-old whiskey in its profile. It's wonderful stuff. And this is coming in at 45%, which again, we're not messing around here. We're not dropping it down to 40%. We're not making it kind of in many ways wishy-washy. This is still
Mhm.
this is our flagship, but we didn't drop it down to 43. Rachel chose 45. Very intentional, like with the 50.5 with the Sandend. It's the sweet spot for that whiskey.
Wow. Wow, I'm loving every part of this. It's
And
it
yeah.
is it is straight to the point. It is beautiful. It's right now I'm like tasting it, and I don't know. Hotel Wi-Fi's are the worst. I just want to tell everybody that. That's why this is now resetting because they literally now is like the hotel Wi-Fi is not so great. For people that don't know, I'm in the middle of a hotel in Vegas now trying to make this show work,
You're doing
and the
great.
thing is like, okay, what is wrong with this Wi-Fi? It's dropping in and out, and now the image is frozen because it takes a lot to run multiple, the camera and all that. And I'm
Yeah,
like, what is going on now? But this single malt is making it worth every single moment.
absolutely. No, I bet I've got a funny face on if I've frozen. That's always what
Oh
happens.
no,
I'm always
your face
throwing my.
looked good. Mine is the worst right now.
Oh no. Well, this is
Okay,
gonna be
so
this will
but
be an
this is
audio
great.
only.
This is great. This is great because we are finally back. Um, and you are appearing really beautifully. So keep being as beautiful as you are. And and finally, I am back, and I'll make sure the camera is reset the right way. Yep, we are
Oh, there you
finally
go. You're
back.
back.
Yeah,
Perfect.
we are back
I
in
see you.
motion. But when I tell you the Wi-Fi in hotels are the worst, they are truly the worst.
They are the
Uh,
worst. Oh, I know that
usually, I
firsthand.
usually am plugged in, when I'm in my home at my studio at home, so I'm always on at 100%. So I've been
Oh yeah.
spoiled. But this 12 year is definitely your flagship. This
Yeah.
12 year will give Glendronach a run for their money. That's for
Yeah.
sure. I'm sure you cannot even choose a favorite kid because those
No.
sherry notes are subtle but perfect. Like the 45 is the perfect for me. 45 is always a winner. You cannot go wrong with 45. It's always a winner when it comes to single malt. I don't like 42. It's too
No.
it's too it's too light.
Hmm.
45 is where I feel like you're keeping all the flavors there. You're still giving it a little bit of joy. You're still giving the consumer to go on a journey that helps. So for you guys, I'm
100%.
telling you right now, I haven't tried the third one yet, but if you're the classic, I like to call it the classic sherry cask lover, right? We have to be sure you like those classic sherry cask lover. And somebody's gonna get some shots are gonna be fired right now. But Rory is not responsible for this. But for the guy who is tired of spending money on that brand that have a big M in the middle of it, but want to actually have a budget sherry cask, you can choose to spend 149 for the same and better flavor that you can get for a bottle that is under $100.
100%. Well,
So
hey, you said it. I maybe
no,
couldn't
you
get
you
away
are
with
not
saying that, but
responsible for this one. I'm talking to
I'm
my
way
my
too polite.
audience. I'm talking to the people that love those sherry cask note. Yeah, the rent is way too high for us to afford some of this whiskey anymore. So
It's true.
it's really refreshing to see 100, like a nice sherry cask bottle that is still at a good price for you to grab. Here's what I will tell y'all.
Mhm.
I'm Rory and I, we are putting you on right now because next year, knowing how the whiskey industry works, next year you may not be able to afford this anymore. Okay, I'm just telling you right now that happened to every single good brand out there. They get purchased, they get a few awards, they make good whiskey, and then price jump. It happens. So as you hear me right now, do not walk, run to pick up yours before anything happened. Every good whiskey that I've ever loved in my life, it happened to. And I'm telling you, this 12 right here, yeah, like we say in the hood, this is the shit right here. This right here, this is it. So you want to pick it up. If you don't know what the bottle looks like on the side of Rory and I, this is what it looks like. It's one smack down in the middle there, a beautiful sherry cask, a beautiful, like for me, is like classic sherry lover. That is your daily sipper. This is it.
Mhm.
Beautiful wine cast note, beautiful fig, what we get from those sherry note, and that bright spice closing it. What else do you want? Is 100% it. So I'm telling you now, don't say I didn't warn you. We have it on the record. Don't walk, run. Grab yourself one. And I promise you, you can thank me. You can definitely thank me later, because it's one of those things that I remind people: good whiskey, good whiskey never lasts at a low price. That's the one thing you need to know. Good whiskey is never at a low price. So I'm just gonna tell y'all right now: make sure you grab yourself one.
It's funny because I know what you mean with the prices and all that, but it's actually Glenglassaugh is not a big distillery. We don't have crazy volume, and
Mm,
so I was waiting for. I knew an award was going to come out. I was like watching the Whisky Advocate, and I was like, all right, okay, maybe we didn't get it. Glendronach came in top 10 with the cask strength, and I was like, oh, that's good. It's wonderful to see that, but I was like, oh, kind of was hoping Glenglassaugh was going to get something. And then little did I know, I was in Arizona and we got that number one, and I was on a market visit touring around Arizona, and just things exploded. And it's not that I mean, we're very good at kind of not inflating the prices. I think that's something that is sometimes out of our control, but it's actually going to be probably a volume issue. Is that we
mhm.
have the volume, we're good, but I think with Sandend certainly getting that award, people are going out and buying it. But as much as Sandend is fantastic, I'm kind of like the sleeper in our portfolio right now out of the three is the 12, because I don't think people
Mhm.
have really clocked onto that. The 12 is in many ways, like you said, that sherry forward, and it has got bourbon and it's got some red wine casks, but
Yeah,
it's so sherry forward that you wouldn't really. What the bourbon is adding is that deep, rich honeycomb and that
correct.
caramel, and the red wine is giving you some more of that tannic note,
That
that
tannic
lovely
thing that
red
you look
berry
for
note,
in a good. Yep,
which gives you the
yep,
dryness in the back palate, which
correct,
elongates that finish.
correct.
It's wonderful whiskey. So it has a place, and it's maybe just a teaspoon worth of vatted red wine cask going in there,
And I'm
but
telling you
wonderful.
right now, if you love yourself, that's so. I told you, people that like, there's only two or three sherry cast forward whiskeys out there, and that people love so much, but the price is climbing on those. So this is
Mm.
your opportunity to catch one that is just coming on the market, and is Rachel, is Rachel Barry. That's all you need to know. I'm just telling you now. You hear Rachel, Dr. Rachel Barry, run, grab yourself one. And
She
if
is.
you have any complaints, send them my way. Not to Rachel, send them my way.
You're the bouncer. That's right.
I'm the bouncer.
Um,
So
no,
port
Rachel's
soy.
fantastic. But
The
yeah,
Rachel's fantastic. Yeah. Port soy. Tell me about port soy. What does port soy mean?
so port soy is. I actually did mention it just briefly then passing, but I didn't talk about it in regards to the whiskey. Port soy is the name of the little harbor town that's just stone's throw away from the distillery. So if you look on the back of the bottle, if you even go on Google Maps and you zoom in on Glenglassaugh Distillery to get an idea of where we are on the map, you'll see right next door to us is Port Soy. And I did mention a wee bit about serpentine marble, famous for the style of faux marble that was kind of mined in that area. And Port Soy, in many ways, was kind of the capital for that style of marble. It's really a fishing village, actually, when you go back further than that. So in Scots Gaelic, Port Soy, slightly different spelling and a slightly different enunciation. I'm not even going to try because I don't speak Gaelic, sadly. But Port Soy literally means the port of fish. And
Okay.
so it plays, I think, unintentionally really well into this. And it's really good for, as everyone that was getting used to Glenglassaugh for the first time, how to remember this whiskey is quite funny because we're using bourbon, sherry, and port casks in this. So port
Okay.
soy,
Port
port
soy, port
casks,
cask. Yep, makes sense.
and some of the flavors that Rachel Barry was picking up in this whiskey when she was doing her analysis and flavor on the nose and the palate was fermented soy note, which again, think of umami, think of that savory brininess that you get from
Hmm.
the ocean that we're obviously getting that North Sea air in. So port casks and a lovely kind of umami soy note coming through in this whiskey.
And
So
this
it's a good way of remembering this one.
0.1% ABV. Interesting,
14.99.
interesting proof.
Again, to go back to that point, that is Rachel again very very intentionally selecting that ABV
Hmm.
at a sweet spot, and she's and again I just love to see that. I mean, anyone that loves a single cask or a barrel, whatever it is, single barrel for bourbon, seeing those ABVs and it's like, oh, it's 64.5, or it was just
Hmm.
lovely seeing that decimal place being added in there because it just gives you more information. And Do you know what, actually, just on a side note, before we dive into this, I think what Sandend and Portsoy has done on a kind of more of a industry scale, I think for consumers, it's now blasted out what being scared of non-age statements. Because I think NAS's non-age statements were often looked at in single malt as kind of with dubious feelings, like, is it just like young whiskey that's going in there? Or what is
Correct,
it? We don't know what
correct.
it is. And age is such a, it's such a paramount part of whiskey. But I think the more you peel away in single malt and in whiskey in general, you realize that there's so much more to age. And actually, in many ways, age is kind of a way to shackle your hands together when you're a blender. You want to be able to utilize that.
Age is a construct. It definitely is a construct.
And I'm sure you've had some 20-plus-year-old single malts that tasted maybe on par with a 10-year-old, and you've had some
Dude,
10-year-olds that were on par with a 20-year-olds. And
funny,
so,
I had a 50 and a 70-year-old whiskey
oh,
that
jeez.
I actually went, y'all can have it.
No.
Y'all can have
And
it.
I
I'm fine.
often, yeah,
I'm
that's,
fine.
and I've had that happen, and it's awfully sad. That takes a long time to make, but
Yeah,
sometimes you're like,
you really want to love it. You do want to
yeah.
love it. But it's like, I don't know about this. I really
And
don't
then
know about
you have moments where you try a whiskey, and if I didn't know anything about it, it gives me that aha moment. You're like, oh,
it.
this is
Correct.
why I work in this industry, and this is why I love the spirit.
One of my
And
favorite single malt is at Castret and is 5 years old.
beautiful, beautiful, yeah. And
And I
again,
was
it's
like, there's no way, consciously, as a whiskey educator, I want to walk to someone and say, try a 5-year-old single malt.
yeah,
Make absolutely no sense, but it's delicious.
it is, and that's again, there's so much more. There's cask management, there's blending. It's the quality of the wood, quality of the barley, the spirit, the production process. All of that goes into play, and then just to chalk it up to, well, it's better when it's a year or 2 or 5 or 10 years older. It's like there's so much more that goes into that. You're just
Oh
taking
my
out
God.
of everything.
And that's actually one thing I have to tell people when I educate them on single malt. I say, you guys in your head have been led by the industry to believe that it has to be at least 12 years old, right? And even, I'm originally from West Africa, and in that culture, the higher the age, the better the whiskey is, right? So you almost have
Mhm.
to break that stereotype in people's head. Like, no, 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 no. Trying a 16-year-old whiskey at 42% ABV that have been blended multiple times and think is because of the age is totally a wrong idea, right? So to tell people now that there is 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old whiskeys that are bringing banger flavor and reminding them that, hey, it's not about age. And people minds start like going in like their circuit breaks, like, oh, no,
Yeah,
that doesn't make any sense, right? So this is your reminder that young whiskey can taste amazing based on
yeah,
how it was made, how the cask was managed, and obviously if it's blended, who is blending it. And you'll
yeah.
be surprised that you may actually end up a whiskey that is less than 10 years old.
It's like I almost equate it to like music, where when you're first getting into music, you're like, oh, that song's great. Who does that song? Who's the band? You're like, oh, that band's great. And then you realize, like, actually, it's the producer behind it that's producing all that music that is maybe the real star of the show, but they're kind of that silent element that when they're whatever their hand is touching, that kind of Midas touch, that's the kind of the Rachel Barry figure, the person that's making that. And of course, she works with a team, and so it's her and her team that's putting these whiskeys together that it starts to challenge what we think about whiskey, and that's the fun of it. It's the fun of it. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Like I'm saying, this whiskeys, every single one of these whiskeys have an amazing finish. The finish, the finish got me. It's like
Hmm.
if somebody asked me, why do you like Glenglassaugh, I'll probably say that's a whiskey that finish gets you. You're here for the whiskey, but the finish have you staying. It's
100%.
it's just that beautiful finish that you cannot almost. It's very particular to it. I'm loving the layer of these flavors where you actually ascend there, and the layer pretty much you can feel the port cask, you can feel those bourbon casks. You literally can taste them all.
Yeah, it's intentional. It feels like you're going through it's a whiskey is taking you on a journey through each of those casks in its individual parts, but at the same time they're so woven seamlessly together. It's just a fantastic journey to go through when you're tasting these. And they're all so different. That's the incredible versatility of this distillery is that we just compare this to Sand End, compare that to the 12. You'd almost think they're coming from different distilleries, but they are just so incredibly well um, representing the flavor profile that they're trying to go after, which in this Port Soy, and again, I put this to you. What is your favorite out of the three? Because I struggle every time I taste this. I'm like, oh,
Dude,
that Port Soy is tasty.
I will tell
Good.
you right now, knowing that I pick my whiskeys based on how I feel, I'm gonna display those three. After a long day, after a long day of work, give me the port soy. It
Hmm.
has everything I need after a long day. If I just want to enjoy a dram sitting on a porch on just to enjoy a dram, I will go for the 12 years old. But if I'm really looking into having a dram, having a cigar, or actually even having a highball, I'm
Yeah,
definitely going to go for
highball,
the Sandan. The Sandan
100%.
definitely will be the first thing I'll use for that highball because with a little bit of sweetness and a little bit of that crispiness, all those notes are going to pop. And as literally, I don't believe that there will be a better whiskey that can bring those flavor notes up, especially because of the ABV. But if I have to
Hmm.
go straight for something I would drink again on a relaxed day, I'm having my 12-year-old. I love the ABV on it. I love the flavor notes that actually come through. But if there's one thing that I'm like, hey, I had a long day. I just want a spirit that can actually calm my spirit, right?
Hmm.
I will have the port soy because those darker notes, those darker fruit in it are almost make you step and think and then have a sip. So I think there is no such thing as one favorite because for me, it's really about mood and how I'm feeling
100%.
about the whiskey. And I tell you what, each single one of these well deserved. Whiskey Advocate did not go wrong on choosing this. I've seen a lot of article, Reddit thing go where does this award came from? Brown Foreman is bribing people, and this is I never even heard. I literally seen somebody post. I never even heard of this whiskey. Now
The
internally,
comments were hilarious. Yeah, I
yeah,
loved it.
right. And internally, it is true. I
Yeah.
really never paid attention to it, and I never really known about it. But that's also your challenge as a consumer. If
Yeah.
someone have the audacity to name a whiskey of the year, you have to ask yourself. Obviously, Whiskey Advocate have one of the best writers out there, and they're very strict about their choices of whiskey.
Oh,
So
yeah.
for them to actually choose one, that's why with no bias, when I need to interview this brand. I know it's
Yeah.
Rachel, that's fine, but I really want to know about this brand. So you heard it from me today. Advocate did not get this whiskey wrong at all. This deserved whiskey of the year, and that I align with. And if you never actually had a chance to try this whiskey, I'm telling you right now, go. They're quite affordable. Walk into a store, grab yourself one, and I'm already telling you in advance, you're welcome. That's what I'm gonna say. You're welcome.
I 100%. It's funny. I remember when I came out and I said to you, I was in Arizona, I was in Phoenix, and that award number one got released, and obviously the phone was blowing up, the emails were blowing up, and if it's funny when I looked at those comments and I saw those comments you're talking about, like I've never heard of this whiskey, and like like did they bribe them, blah blah blah, and it's just like we have no idea. And it's so funny. The reaction from us is always like it's we wish we knew is because we are not, and again, this is a small distillery, small volumes of whiskey historically made. I think our capacity right now is about 1 million liters per year, which is not a lot when you compare it
It's
to some of
not
the
a lot
bigger
at
boys.
all when it comes to
And
single malt.
we're not at full capacity because again, we were testing the waters with this. We're like, all right, let's see how Glenglassaugh does. Because when you look back at the historical volumes of the older batches of whiskey, We were barely moving any whiskey. And so now we're like all hands on deck. Geez, did you see this reward? It's just, it was crazy. And so when I always laugh when people say, oh, those reviews are rigged. I'm like, no, they're not, because we
They're not.
are jumping to attention. As soon as it hits the press, we're like, okay, it's go time for Glenglassaugh. And it's
Right.
been great. And it opens people's eyes as well. And it challenges, like you said, people's perception of what single malt is. And it's not the new kid in the block in many ways. It's got, and if you read the article from Whisky Advocate, it's a love story about a renaissance and a revival of a distillery that is having its moment in the sun. And it's so well deserved. It's waited a
It
long
is.
time
It
for
is.
that
It is
moment. So,
100% well deserved. I'm
yeah.
making sure I'm reaching out to the comments here on the other side that are not displaying to just remind people that this is truly a well-deserved award, a well-deserved uh, whiskey. Congratulations in advance. I'm sure there's going to be more reward coming, more award coming your way. I cannot wait to actually see how this evolve, and I cannot wait knowing how this brand is and the story now. I'm sure there'll be higher age statement probably coming in a year or two or three. I'm sure,
Yeah.
but we're not going to close this interview without me asking,
Oh, yeah.
what's new? What now that we have the three core expression? It's 2024. You winning awards. What should we expect from Glenglassaugh coming up in this year, or maybe end of this year or next year? What are the
Yeah.
expectations now?
So I would expect to see in the US and around the globe as well. Like I mentioned as well, the newest thing that's really happening, and it just happened 3 or 4 days ago now, was we released some of the older casks that are sitting in our warehouses that have sat there since the 70s. And so we have around the kind of mid 1970 vintage mark, we have a 48, a 49, and a 51-year-old. That 48-year-old is aged. These are all single casks that are coming out, and they're going to be released around the globe. So there will not be much of them because these are big casks, but of course,
Mhm.
sharing the love amongst all the global markets does mean that and the US does get a fair share, which is great. So we're not quite sure on how many bottles we'll be getting just yet, because this is very hot off the press. But that 48-year-old I am most interested about because it is a Aliatico red wine cask, which is a variety of red wine that's from Italy. And it, from what I've seen from Rachel, it has a phenomenal presence on the palate and the nose. And Glenglassaugh, again, enjoying it as we've enjoyed it here, maximum 12. And then obviously with the non-age statement stuff, there's some variation of age statements going into that. Even at that younger age statement, it still punches well above its weight. And so when it gets into that 30, 40, 50-year-old realm, Glenglassaugh is punching even above that. And it almost takes on this kind of, I almost equate it to like this kind of Rancio, Cognac, Armagnac note that it starts to develop.
Mhm.
And it's fantastic. And with the red wine cask, the tannic kind of tannins that we found in the 12-year, I would love to
Correct.
see that at a 48-year-old. So that's the three casks that we've got launching, and that's called our Serpentine collection. Yeah, so very
Okay.
exciting.
If there's one thing you want the average consumer to know, not the really rich one, but the average consumer to know about Glenglassaugh that I did not ask in this interview, what would be the one thing you want the average consumer to know about Glenglassaugh as they're discovering it, hearing about it, and going to pick it up at the store?
Ooh, that's a toughie. There's so much. I'm gonna go with. I think there will be a Glenglassaugh for you. I think that's the three are so different, no matter where you land. And if you're in a bar or if you have a couple of friends that you go in on with bottles, I think when you taste through the three core range, and you nailed it perfectly. Depending on your mood, depending on what your taste is at that particular time in your single malt journey, I think Glenglassaugh provides something for each mood and for someone on their journey of single malt. So whether they're starting to pull into that smoky station, that peated whiskey note, Port Soy is there with something that's familiar from Isla, but it's not Isla. It's a Highland peated whiskey, and it's got that coastal aspect. And Sandend, if you're wanting something to really challenge you in terms of what single malt is, that pineapple, papaya, grapefruit note, buttery vanilla is going to challenge that, and it's going to put you in a place you've probably never been in single malt. Phenomenal. And then for the 12, more of that classic sherried note. So there's something for everyone. And I think that if you're getting into single malt, you can have so much fun just exploring Glenglassaugh alone, let alone starting to go to different distilleries. So yeah. And I love when people say to me when they're new in their single malt journey that they don't like this whiskey, but they like this whiskey. I'm like, that's perfect. That's okay. You might not like it now. Yeah. You're starting to hone that blade a little bit.
I will tell you guys right now, his name is Rory Glasgow. And if you want to find him and follow his journey as he's telling people about his story, it's Dram with Rory on Instagram. Go follow him. Give him a follow, Dram with Rory. If you're more of a professional, you can follow him. He also Rory Glasgow on LinkedIn and everywhere else. So just look him up. The man is knowledgeable. He's a good representation of this brand. Rory, I appreciate you coming in. This is now our time. Thank you so much for taking the time and coming and chat with me for everybody to know about Glasgow. You have a fan in me. Now, as far as this product, I cannot wait for the evolution of it. For all of you guys here, thank you for tuning in. Thanks for being here. And if you pick up again Glasgow, post it, tag Rory, tag Glasgow. They're everywhere on social media, so they can actually know that people are picking up their bottles and they're trying something new on the market. Thank you all so much for being here. And till next time, slancha, like they say in Scotland.
Slancha, Jack. Thanks for having me. Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
There's a place where the land meets the sea, where the senses are awakened, and sweet air mingles with the crack of sea salt, where luscious waves of tropical fruit are carried on an ocean breeze until they come home to rest in this place of perfect harmony, with rolling waves of flavor shaped